Welcome to the special webinar, The Upcoming Trump Administration, What Should Be Expected? My name is Dr. Stephen Sussman. I am a professor of public administration in the Andreas School of Business and Public Administration at Barry University in Miami and co-founder of the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research. Dr. Luis Fleischman and I, along with a team of dedicated colleagues, established the center as an outlet for the marketplace of ideas. The Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research is a nonpartisan public policy organization, a research center, and a think tank. We are a gathering of scholars, experts, and community stakeholders engaged in research and dialogue in an effort to create practical policy recommendations to current local, national, and international challenges. Our core values of diversity, balance, and community define us and set us apart from other organizations. As an organization, we value diverse voices and views and see it as a means to create a healthy debate. The center provides a balanced platform where civilized communication, exchange of ideas, and inclusion prevail over party politics and dogmatic views. Our objective is to be a community and place of gathering for academics, professionals, elected officials, decision makers, civil society groups, and leaders. Please visit our website at palmbeachdemocracy.org. On the site, you will find links to our past webinars and links to the many articles we've published over the years. On our website, you will find a donation button. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Through your generous donations, we are able to bring you important and timely programs and articles. I will now turn this over to Dr. Fleischman, Luis, who will introduce our distinguished panelist, Congressman Mark Foley, and we're waiting still for Kerry Healy to come. Dr. Fleischman will then turn it over to me to introduce our distinguished moderator, Dr. Sean Foreman. Luis?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, good morning, everyone. While we are waiting for Dr. Healy, I have the pleasure to introduce Congressman Mark Foley. I had the pleasure to work with Congressman Foley for a good number of years in my previous capacity as Community Relations Director for the Jewish Federation here in Palm Beach County. He was I have to admit, he was a very effective and responsive member of Congress. He served for 12 years, or I would say 6 terms in the US House of Representatives. Previously, he served 1 term in the Florida Senate and another term in the House of Representatives. As you can see, a meteoric rise. In the US House of Representatives, he served on the Ways and Means Committee, and he was also a deputy majority whip. After he resigned from Congress in 2006, he re-entered the business world, and something that I didn't say is that before he entered public life, he was a businessman and also a local councilman. So after 2006, he re-entered the business world and began buying real estate investments and providing business consulting services. Among other things, he orchestrated the sale of the First Bank of Indiantown, on which he still serves as a member of the board of directors. Mark recruited the Washington National Major Leagues Baseball franchise to West Palm Beach and engineered the deal that culminated in the ballpark of the Palm Beaches, where basically is where the spring training of the Houston Astros actually takes place, and also the Washington Nationals. It is also the place where Palm Beach State College has the commencement every, twice a year. So congratulations, Mark, on your achievements. So he's currently consulting for numerous high-profile clients and has successfully lobbied Congress on various important educational projects. Now, Steve, I hand it over back to you, and you will introduce the moderator.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Am I off mute? Yes. Yeah. So before I introduce Sean, I just want to say we welcome all questions. You can write your question in the chat box, or when we are ready for questions, you can raise your hand virtually or otherwise. Dr. Sean Foreman, our moderator, is an adjunct professor of political science and the former chair of the Department of History and Political Science at Barry University in Miami. He teaches history now at Palmer Trinity School in Palmetto Bay. Dr. Foreman received his MA and PhD from PhD in political science from Florida International University. Dr. Foreman was the 2012 recipient of the Florida Campus Compact Graham Frey Civic Award. The award recognizes outstanding contributions to the development of civic learning and engagement in sustaining our participatory democracy. Dr. Foreman is quoted in publications around the world and has been interviewed on numerous radio and television stations. I have a long drive to campus and often hear him on radio on the drive down to campus. Suffice it to say, Dr. Foreman is the go-to political scientist in Miami. His research interests include U.S. politics and elections, state and local government, and the politics and economics of sports. Dr. Foreman is the co-editor of 8 books, including 7 in the Road to Congress series. His most recent book in this series in 2022 is subtitled Campaigning in the Era of Trump and COVID-19. He is currently working on the 2024 edition. Sean, I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm off mute, yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate being asked to moderate this program. I want us to get right to it. I really want to hear from our panelists. We had a nice discussion already going before the recording and the formal program began. So I'm eager to hear the questions. As Steve mentioned, you can either put them in the chat or raise your virtual hand for a little bit later, as we have some questions for Representative Foley, Mark, and for the Lieutenant Governor when she comes, and then we'll go from there. 2 quick messages from me. One, I forgot my glasses at home today. I don't know how I did that, but when I got to work, I realized I couldn't read or see very well, so I had to borrow reading glasses from someone, and they don't work as well. So I'm going to read the questions a little awkwardly. And then secondly, my just brief introduction is, we all know what the election outcomes were, that Donald Trump won the Electoral College and the popular vote and will be the president come January 20th for the inauguration. And the results of the congressional elections, briefly, earlier in the year, it looked like perhaps the House of Representatives would go from having Republican Party majority control to Democratic Party majority control. And it looked like perhaps the Senate would go the opposite way, from having Democratic majority to Republican majority. And again, as we all know, it turned out that Republicans retained the majority in the House, although Democrats gained 1 seat. And so now we officially know the numbers of elected officials are 220 Republicans and 215 Democrats, a slim majority for Republicans. But again, most of us probably already know that a few of those seats are being vacated, and so because of Trump appointments, and so the number is even slimmer. And then in the Senate, Republicans did gain 4 seats, defeat 3 incumbents, flip 4 seats, and we'll have a 53-47 majority. And so I just wanted to lay that out and then jump right to the questions. And since we have Mark with us first, so I have questions that the center provided for us, and again, we want to hear from you all as we move along. But let's just lay some groundwork out. And Mark, can you tell us what you think the recent election results tell us about voter sentiment this year? Voter sentiment, and what were the issues that most seemed to most resonate with people in the electorate this year, according to you?
Well, if you look back during the years of COVID, we had a reset in the whole country. Everybody's attitude changed, their feeling of freedom changed, their work experience changed. They were not any longer going to the office, but working from home. They were all buying Pendleton bikes and running around doing exercise. And all of a sudden, there was a dramatic shift. There was a change of presidency from Trump to Biden. And I think one of the things that was the challenge for the administration is when they decided to undo all of the executive orders relative to the border. I think the border is probably sum and substance the one issue that has galvanized voters away from their traditional mindset. They may have been previously moderate Democrats, they may have been independents, they may have been moderate Republicans. One thing they saw as a stark contrast was the amount of illegal immigration pouring over the borders. Most national TV broadcasts didn't cover it. Fox did. Fox covered it daily. And anyone watching in their own communities saw what was a large increase of illegal immigration, mostly in New York, Chicago, and the large cities. That added a burden to the taxpayers there that they saw as a waste of money, considering their own issues, their own plight, their own unemployment was being exacerbated by these things. That's probably issue number one. Second issue came about, I think, in the transgender movement when we had debates over people participating in sports. Boys who identified as girls going into girls' locker rooms, playing in sports where their physical capabilities were much better than others. That's another subset of issues that caused an alienation of some of the more liberal policies espoused by the Democrats. And the voices in the Democratic Party were silent to some of these issues as they tried to build what they thought was a bigger base of support with immigration, with all these other issues, that we would somehow find the political calculus to win a major election. Add inflation, which was a huge thing to, when you're pumping your gas, when you're going to buy chicken, which is almost a daily or weekly occurrence, you're shocked by the costs. So you add a couple issues together, the subset of issues caused voters in middle America to reject the policies of this administration. Considering the voices of America, the LA Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times, all based in what are geographically more liberal districts, areas of the country, they were preaching to people that had long shut off that voice and said, I sense my own problems, my own reality, my own challenges. So they no longer were thinking about the common good, they were thinking about individual issues. And it resulted in quite a startling determination in the ballot box by Trump winning all of the battleground states, winning the popular vote, not by much. And I resist the Republican effort to call it a mandate, because we haven't seen a mandate in a long time, since probably Ronald Reagan's election. But nonetheless, he won the popular, he won the electoral, and now is set to govern in a new direction.
Yes, indeed. And I'll trust that Luis and or Steve will let us know when when President Healy joins us, college president and lieutenant governor, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that
I'm
we can
following up.
keep the time flowing, and I'll keep my comments limited so we can get others in later. But what Mark said there resonates with what I observed. I live in Miami-Dade County, and I was thinking from my watching the news that perhaps Harris was going to win Pennsylvania and the Democrats would hold the blue wall. But I happened to go visit family. I was in Western Pennsylvania on Halloween and the couple days after, the weekend before the election, in Western Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh. and the signs were for Trump. Even though signs don't vote, people do. But the television coverage, the blanketed commercials, and they were focused on the border and the transgender issues. And I really think that resonated in Pennsylvania and across the blue wall, and was part of the determining factors in the presidential election. So Mark, what do you see in terms of voter engagement and turnout? How is it different this year, 2024, than in past presidential elections, of either the parties trying to engage voters or whether people were interested in issues? You sort of already touched on it, but what did you see in terms of voter engagement overall?
Well, I start my life as a Massachusetts Irish Democrat, growing up there for just 3 years, then moved to Florida. So I have a bipartisan spirit in my blood. What I watched was a unique set of circumstances. When I became a Republican in 1984 after Reagan's second election, I saw at that time people in the Republican Party were men in smoking jackets, women in pearls. They all were business leaders, but it was a country club set mentality. The Palm Beach Post called after the 20 election and said, "What has Trump done different to the Republican Party?" And I said, "I've got nothing." I hung up and I said, no, I've got to call back because I need to explain. And I did. And I said, "I'll tell you what's different from that analysis that I just gave of the country club Republican to people that are pipe fitters, firefighters, cops, lawn maintenance people standing on intersections with Trump signs. I couldn't get people to hold signs for me when I was running for office. They are out there hours in the sun on the interstates, and they're people of every walk of life. So the Republican Party did a deep dive into a different demographic than I would have ever assumed. Now, Massachusetts is a state that elects Republican governors and has a divided government. I think the current governor is a Democrat, but years past, there have been, as was California during the year of Pete Wilson and Ronald Reagan, would elect a Republican and a majority legislature in the Democratic Party, and it kind of worked. But in this year, I think the challenge was identifying with voters on issues that mattered to them. And people would say, "Oh, they're going to hate Trump because he's talking about immigration." Well, if you're able to vote, you're a legal immigrant, and you have obtained that opportunity through either hard work or waiting in line, paying fees, doing all the things necessary to become a citizen. My grandmother came from Poland. She learned to speak English. She had a job. She had to have a sponsor. For Hispanics, they see this illegal immigration as a challenge because they say, why are they being allowed to come into this country, being put up in high-rise hotels in New York, giving food cards when I'm struggling to pay grocery bills for my own family? It also dovetails on the social issues because Hispanics are largely Roman Catholic or religious. And so when they see those issues of transgender politics, it causes them disdain. Not that they're bigoted or trying to be homophobic. They don't understand it. We jumped from a situation where everyone was living amongst themselves. People were getting married in the gay community. Nobody cared. They were adopting kids. It was a different dynamic. And now all of a sudden we're being thrust into this huge new conversation. And so Hispanic voters who are legally here, who are voting, who are largely Catholic, find a number of those issues that cause them to pivot from what may be their normal. In Miami-Dade County, we hadn't won Miami-Dade County in quite a while. And now all of a sudden we're winning in a county that was largely probably blue up until, unless a Bush ran, Jeb Bush or someone else that were from Miami-Dade County. So it's been a complete catharsis, if you will, of voter demographic.
Thank you. And you've sort of answered the next question was going to be about minority voters and different demographics. So I think you've already touched on that. And the country club Republicans comment, I agree with you on that. That's how we sort of viewed the old Republican Party. indeed, the 2000 election, the recount, there was the Brooks Brothers riot, right?
Right?
In Miami-Dade County. And I anyway, I when I use that phrase, people don't identify as country club Republicans anymore because the party is changing so quickly. And again, my Western Pennsylvania roots in 2016, I had guys who I knew, who I grew up with, who didn't go to college, who were the type of blue collar workers that Mark mentioned, and they registered to vote and they voted for Trump. And they were part of this movement that helped him win even this year. And even back in Miami-Dade County, big Trump golf cart caravans on the side of the streets every day leading up to the election. Didn't see that for Democrats or Harris. So again, they'll keep us posted if we need to shift what we're doing. But Mark, I wondered, and you're the perfect person to ask about this, what lessons should politicians from both parties learn? Actually, no, what I wanted to ask you is, do you think the election results will push leaders towards greater bipartisanship? Or do you expect that we'll have more partisan retrenchment in the coming years?
Human nature is to want to win, and Democrats are struggling to figure out how. When I got elected to the legislature in 1990, there were 80 Democrats, 40 Republicans in the state house, and probably, I think, 14 Republicans to 26 in the Senate, Democrat. When I got elected to the Senate in 92, we were 2020. Charlie Crist and I beat two women who were supposedly going to win in the year of the woman. It was the election of 92. Charlie Crist won against Helen Gordon Davis in the Tampa region, and I won against Eleanor Weinstock here in Palm Beach County. We brought the Senate to 2020, even split. We shared the presidency. It was the best year in politics for me because every voice counted of the 40 members. You couldn't just run roughshod over anybody. You had to get consensus. You had to deliver 21 votes to win on an issue. So you had to engage somebody on the other side of the aisle in order to shape public policy. My gut would say this could be one of those unique times. But the politics today are of such a nature that it's all about winning for your team, not about for the country. So it bothers me that when we have an opportunity to make landmark legislation or compromise or figure out deficits and budgets, and we'll go back to our corners because it's the nature of politics today. It's about fighting and winning, not solving problems. So I'd love to say that we're in a new era. We're going to turn the page, as Kamala liked to say repeatedly, but I have a less than positive look at that, only because knowing the inner beast of the members of Congress, from different disparate districts, they don't understand the coast. They don't understand, being in Florida is a unique mix of people from I always say Florida, look at Florida from years ago and look at it now. When I moved to Palm Beach County as a 3-year-old, not that I had a choice, I had asthma, so we came down here. There are 127,000 people in the 1960 census in Palm Beach County. Today, there's 127,000 living in Wellington alone. So you look at the 2+ million people that have moved in the last 65 years, 64 years, 65 soon. It's a complete shift. Ironically, the electorate that comes down to Florida now was prior registered Democrat. If you go to the villages and you talk to the voters there, which is a very large bastion of Republican voters, and I've spoken there many times, and I'd hear the voice patterns of the people that I would meet. And I said, well, you sound like you're from Brooklyn. And he said, oh, I'm Brooklyn. Yeah. I said, so I would assume you were a garment or longshoreman or police, fire. Oh, yeah, I'm a proud Democrat. Oh, how did you become a Republican? They said, well, when we moved down here, we already paid our taxes and educated our kids. We don't want to pay for those kids today. We want to live in our retirement, spend our own money. It was quite bizarre to me that somebody would flip their party, move to Florida, but it's what was happening at the time and still is to this day. So it creates just a contest of wills and physical strength to see if you can maneuver some of these people into a better, more generous spirit. I'd like to be more optimistic, but right now I feel like we're going to go back to our corners just like boxers and wait for the bell to ring to come out on round 3.
Yeah, I want to be optimistic too. And again, you're the right guy for us to talk about because you have a reputation of being bipartisan and moderate and the experience you're talking about there. But do you think the slim majority will force them into some bipartisanship, or still will be retrenching based on the political environment?
I think it will cause some amount of bipartisanship. Jared Moskowitz was on Fox yesterday. He appears there frequently. He's a Democratic member from Broward County. He was talking about excited to work with DOJ to see if there's efficiencies in government. John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania, he could see the writing on the wall. He was predicting that Pennsylvania was going to go to Trump. Nobody listened because they didn't believe him. These are two, I think, that are showing a propensity to be open to dialogue. You know, to be bipartisan doesn't mean you sold your soul or given up the ghost of your party allegiance. It's about what's best for the community you serve. I went to Washington every day knowing that, you know, probably 45 to 50% of my district were Democrats, you know, or independents. But I knew that I couldn't win a majority of votes by just hoping the Republicans liked me. So I had to work as if every vote mattered. And you know, Pennsylvania, you may remember the name John Fox, who was elected by a slim majority of 137 votes back in '94. Every time we have a vote, I'd say, John, what's the matter? He would be sweating. He said, Mark, I don't know what to do. I said, it's a motion to adjourn. You can be safely adjourning the Congress. He said, oh, thank God. But he would be on the phone calling voters in his district between votes, talking to people. He had to work for every vote. And that's what I like about the spirit of bipartisanship, because it forces you to recognize you're just not representing your own flag. You're representing people of different backgrounds. So I think there's an opportunity. I think Jared Moskowitz has been frequently on Fox, which shows he's not afraid of the enemy camp. He wants to engage, wants to show a spirit of cooperation. So those two signs for me the last couple of days are meaningful in as much as if they'll step out of the breach, other Democrats going to find, you know, I can't fight this resistance forever. I've got to figure out how to make some opportunities. Otherwise, they get punished by the speaker. He takes stuff out of your district. He moves stuff around. So there's a force majeure that takes place and gets you to cooperate and participate because of the threat of losing things, or maybe even losing your next election because you've been part of the resistance movement rather than the forward movement.
Yes. Let's hope some of that optimism will carry forward, and a few of those leaders will keep pushing.
Sean, Lieutenant Governor Dr. Healy is here, and she's under the name of Amy Todd. Amy Todd is her assistant. So welcome, Kerry. I will briefly introduce her, and maybe you want to summarize the very important and interesting things that Congressman Foley actually said about why Trump won, what is the problem with the current political leadership. So I will introduce Kerry quickly, and she can join the conversation. Dr. Kerry Healy is currently the executive chair of the Forward Party, a new party. She will talk about it later, and teaches public sector leadership at Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. She served as the first woman president of Babson College from 2013 to 2019, where she had impressive accomplishments. Then before that, from 2003 to 2007, Dr. Healy served as the 70th Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts, and Mark Foley is from Massachusetts, as he pointed out just a few minutes ago. She holds an AB in government from Harvard College and a PhD in political science and law from Trinity College in Dublin. I met Dr. Healy for the first time back in 2009. We both were part of a delegation that observed the Honduras presidential election after the country suffered a major political crisis. Later, Dr. Healy kindly invited me to join the Romney for President team as an advisor for Latin American affairs. Dr. Healy also initially helped us with the inaugural event of our Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research. I am glad she agreed to join us this morning. Welcome, Dr. and Lieutenant Governor Healy. Sean, back to you.
Okay, thank you. We're very pleased to have Dr. Healy with us. Yeah, and off mute, so we're going to put you right to it. Rather than recap what we talked about, and so we've been talking about politics and election results. We were going to shift to policy next, but this is good to now. I wanted to ask Dr. Healy for how do you interpret the recent presidential and congressional election results? What do you tell us about? What can you tell us about your thoughts on the voter sentiment and what issues really resonated with voters this year?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much to Luis for inviting me, and my apologies to everyone for my problems getting on today. I apologize about that. My impression of what happened is obviously through the lens of someone who has departed the Republican Party, because I genuinely felt that the party was going in a direction that was not what I had been expecting for the prior 40 years of my Republican Party membership. And I think that what we saw in this last election was not necessarily a wholesale adoption of President Trump and his values and his approach, so much as a basic change election. This was an election where genuinely the right direction, wrong direction pointed very much to the wrong direction. People were concerned about bread and butter issues. They were concerned about simply what was going on internationally. They felt they were concerned about our weakness internationally, and the chaos that had created. And so I think that what you're seeing was a rejection of the status quo. They did not want a continuation of the Biden administration, and it was a simple change election. And that's a little bit different than a realignment. It certainly looked like a realignment when you see everything going to one side of the ledger in that way. But I think it was more complex, and I think that unfortunately, we're going to have to figure out in midterms how much of a genuine realignment this was versus simply a rejection of the status quo.
Okay, that's interesting, and maybe we could have you continue on a little bit with. So you're saying you don't think it's a realignment, but we've got something going on. So maybe would you talk a little bit more about voter demographics and specific groups, either younger voters or minority voters, and what you saw in terms of their interest and turnout?
Yes, I think one of the things that has realigned, which is very interesting, is that all of the usual categories that pollsters and politicians alike have been looking at to sort of divide America into meaningful categories where we can say, okay, younger voters are going this way, or African American voters are going that way, or women or suburban women are going this way, are now much less important than college educated voters and non-college educated voters. And so if there's a realignment, it's with the college educated voters moving now toward the Democratic Party, and the non-college educated voters who have traditionally often been involved with the trades and people who are associated more with the Democratic Party. They are in fact moving toward that Republican message as represented by President Trump and his populism. So I think the shakeup that we're seeing is that all of the usual categories that we've been using to try to understand social movement are not as important as they used to be, and we need to be looking for new ones.
Thank you. Good point. So Representative Foley had mentioned before the changes in the Republican Party, which we're all aware of. It used to be kind of considered a country club type party image in the Bush years and so on. When I use that phrase to my mother-in-law, she gets shocked. And I'm like, but you were a country club Republican. And that's maybe what, people are yearning for the party to still be, but it's become now this mixture, and the blue collar or non-college educated workers have taken over the direction of the party. And I noticed that. I was making the comment, I'm originally from Western Pennsylvania. Yeah, I'm a college educated college professor, but all of my friends who didn't go to college came out of the woodwork in 2016 and still through to today, registering to vote and supporting Trump 100%. And so I think that's the new category of voters that we don't quite have a handle on where they fit. So one more for you, President Healy, and then we can bring Mark back in. Um, do you think, so I'd mentioned before, and you know what the results were in the Senate and the House and the majorities. Do you think that there's a chance that we'll see more bipartisanship moving forward with, the close margins, or more retrenchment and further partisan activity moving forward?
Yeah, so I am very saddened actually by what I suspect will be an even more polarized environment. One of the forces that had been moving at least the House more toward bipartisan collaboration was something called the Problem Solvers Caucus, which was something that was supported by the No Labels movement. And they had recruited equal numbers of Republican congresspeople and Democratic congresspeople who were more in that mid-range, the sort of more conservative Democrats and the more left-leaning Republicans, to the extent that they existed. And they came in 2 by 2. And so, but eventually the Problem Solvers Caucus got such a good reputation for genuinely being able to talk across the lines and get certain things passed, that it became unwieldy. There are now more than 60 members of this caucus, and it's sort of lost its identity. Also, No Labels' attempt to run a presidential ticket has, I believe, greatly discredited in many people's minds No Labels, and made that affiliation, even though the Problem Solvers Caucus was not officially linked with No Labels. It was, in fact, a lot of the funding for those House members who wanted to speak out and be more independent of their party. That was coming through No Labels. So I'm afraid that whole coalition right now is very dysfunctional. So and we're not going to see the kind of collaboration, either formally or informally, as we have in the past in the House. So I think that's I'm reading the tea leaves to say that that there's going to be more polarization, more partisanship there, not less. Similarly, in the Senate, we had seen a group of 10 senators, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, people like Mitt Romney and Rob Portman, Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, Senator Collins, who all had been coming together to make sure that important bills like the infrastructure bill could actually pass. And while it wasn't a formal organization in the same way that the Problem Solvers Caucus was in the House, it functioned in the same way, and they felt very empowered by their ability to get things passed and to work together in a nonpartisan manner. That is now gone. So with the departure of Portman and Romney and Manchin, we're really just seeing a few people, Lisa Murkowski, to some degree, Senator Collins, left there looking for potential allies. We see a potential ally coming in with John Curtis from Utah, but by and large, we're not going to see that strong coalition on the left and the right in the Senate either. So my outlook, my forecast is not positive in terms of that sort of collaborative nature in the Senate moving forward.
I'm going to follow up with you real quick, and then again bring Mark back in, and then we want to hear about Forward Party moving forward. But do you think it was a mistake for No Labels to ultimately not run a candidate? I mean, what you said there, and us purple people really were stuck, and you make it sound like there's no purple moving forward. But was that a real big blunder? I mean, because they didn't run someone at the end. It was like, well, decided not to. But was that handled improperly? That messed up that potential voting block?
Well, look, I'm going to show my my bias in my answer here. So so my bias is that a third party has to start from the bottom up, from the ground up. It has to be a grassroots movement and that you're never actually going to have a successful third-party candidacy or movement by parachuting someone in from the top. And starting with a presidential candidate. And I don't care if that's Mike Bloomberg, or Ross Perot. When you parachute in from the top, you might have some limited support, but ultimately you're not going to have the grassroots support. You're not going to have the institutional support, the advisors, the donors to help you get that across the line. And when No Labels presented this opportunity to any number of very distinguished candidates who would have been probably effective candidates had they been running with one of the two major parties, I believe that they hesitated because of that lack of infrastructure and because of the lack of the future after that. What happens after you lose? What happens the day after? Is there a party there to help you run again? No, there wasn't. So this is why I've taken the approach, alternatively, of trying to build forward, with Andrew Yang and Christy Whitman and others from the bottom up. We did not run a candidate for president in the last cycle simply because we knew we weren't ready to do that, to support that kind of candidacy. And I think that, very reasonable people like Senator Manchin, who would have been, to my view, a very credible presidential candidate, he turned down the opportunity to run on that No Labels ticket, in part because he did not believe it was winnable without the underlying infrastructure.
Thank you very, very much for that perspective. Let me bring Mark back in and then ask you both about policy, and then definitely want to open it up to the questions from our audience, from other participants, attendees. So let me know if you have questions. But here, let me ask Mark and then Carrie, please. What do you think any major policy shifts that you can predict or anticipate coming with the new administration, the Trump administration, and with the Congress majorities we talked about? So what do you predict in terms of policy platform going through on campaign promises? Mark, and we're speculating here to the extent you're willing to be comfortable. It's not, I don't think this is going to show up in the Sun Sentinel, but this is amongst us here. What do you predict?
Well, I sense that the one thing I love about our country is the fact we have checks and balances. And with the House's narrow majority Republican, they're going to be hard pressed. And the Senate, too, will play a strong role here. I think you're seeing it play out in some of the president's nominations for cabinet posts. I don't know what he was thinking about with Matt Gaetz. That was a completely crazy start to his nomination process. The Senate's not going to simply rubber stamp what the president wants to do. And he's going to quickly realize they're political animals who have to fight for their own survival. So while he has a heavy hand in their future by threatening them with primaries and what have you, there's still a cadence to the Senate that I've always admired that's slower than the House. We take a more deliberate approach. We know that in every cycle, there's another couple seats up that can control and contain the majority or expand it. So there's a natural check and balance that's both in law and in nature of the way politics operates. So I sense that there will be some new directions. I think this DOGE committee is going to occupy a lot of time. We've seen that. We were discussing earlier before we came online, the Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan's approach to solving Social Security. That wasn't always easy on every member. Dan Rostenkowski's car was almost tipped over in the parking lot of the Capitol because of his efforts to reform Social Security. But all of these programs have to be looked at thoroughly to see what are the good things that we have to provide for in order to ensure their viability. We can keep talking about this till we're blue in the face, but the viability of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, other programs is deeply at stake. The deficit's running so high and the cost of servicing the debt is starting to crowd out every other opportunity to resolve the program, the funding of those programs. So I think, the policy issues aren't going to deviate from where we are today. There's going to be a push and a pull, but, resolution of some of these long-seated problems has to occur, and I think everybody recognizes it. Wall Street CNBC talks about it every morning on the deficit and projections and how we're going to reconcile. Every politician that gets on there speaks about how they have to bring some fiscal balance to our nation. I think it's going to be reflective on how we get to the future by looking at where we've been in the past. I did want to say something about the bipartisanship, because I was a member of the Tuesday lunch bunch, which met on Wednesday, which was always disconcerting to me. But there were 40 of us Republicans, Nancy Johnson, Chris Shays, myself, Jim Colby. There were a number of us that viewed the social issues as very important for Republicans to not go overboard. Tom DeLay would bring up an abortion vote every other week, and he'd say, well, we've got to get those Southern Democrats to either vote with us on abortion or we'll challenge them or have them thrown out of office. And I said to Tom, Tom, we have these votes every week. 10% of Americans are rabidly pro-choice, 10% are rabidly pro-life, 80% of us don't want to talk about this. It's a deeply personal issue that we shouldn't be discussing as if it's a ham sandwich. This is a very deeply philosophical issue. It's a religious issue. It's a woman's choice. There's a lot of fundamental things going on here, but we're constantly talking about what no one else is in this building. And that's why we're in the paradigm we are, because we're always taking on lightning rod issues. And one other point on that, is anybody going to tell the truth anymore in politics? You know, every Supreme Court justice that was nominated said Roe v. Wade was settled law. And the next thing we turn around and it's not settled anymore. And the president's not going to pardon his son, but he does. I mean, whatever, every Trump, Biden, Supreme Court justices, we've certainly got to get to a point where we can honestly tell the truth. Even if it means, Biden, I'm going to pardon my son. I can promise you that he's my son, and I'm going to take advantage of the presidential perks of pardon. But somehow we keep twisting the voters into believing something we say under testimony in front of the Judiciary Committee on Supreme Court nominations. And then as soon as the first bill comes up, the Dobbs decision, oh, let's go with that. So those are the troubling things that we have to wrestle with going forward, because otherwise the public will never trust any of us.
That's a super big point. I'd like to talk about it more, but I'm gonna say, let's put a pin in that. And yeah, will anyone tell the truth anymore? And what are the consequences if they don't? But I wanted to go to Carrie to hear her perspective. And again, yeah, and then the question in the chat. But Carrie, your thoughts on policy perspectives moving forward?
Sure. And I just want to double down on the Congressman's last point there that is so important. We have to figure out how to reweave society so that people regain trust in our institutions and in particular in our public representatives. So that's a worthy topic of discussion on its own. In terms of policies that we might see coming out of this, I mean, obviously we're going to see a compromise in Ukraine. I think it's going to be to the Ukrainians' detriment. And I think that that's something that we can anticipate happening very, very quickly. Another issue that we know is going to go forward and change is a doubling down on tariffs. I suspect that will continue until it becomes clear that this may result in inflation and price increases here in the U.S. And then there may be a quiet backing off from some of those tariffs. But right now, I think we can just expect more and more, tariffs flowing forward. We can expect a doubling down also on immigration policy, a tightening of immigration policies. Again, this is an opportunity for the Trump administration to get this right. Because we not only need to tighten the borders and make sure that we are having only legal immigration, but we also need to open up immigration to those workers who we need and who we want, to make the economy vibrant. And so no politician has really been able to get that right. So far, they haven't been able to strike that balance between making sure that we're actually enforcing our border issues, but also opening up America to the right people at the right time. And hopefully the administration will take it on themselves to do that. I'm really looking for changes in HHS. I'm very interested to see what's going to go on. with RFK, whether he's going to, I believe he will follow through with, a lot of his concerns around fluoridation and other things that we'll learn more about. And so I expect that environment to be extremely dynamic. I think that if there are going to be layoffs, there might need to be layoffs there because the bureaucracy is not going to go along, I believe, with what RFK would want them to do. So I think that there will be tumult in health policy during the Trump administration. And to the extent that there can be meaningful and useful reforms with Social Security, now might be a great time to do it. Some of them are very obvious, but people in office have not had the courage to do them. They must be done. And so one very positive thing that the Trump administration could accomplish would be needed reforms and entitlements.
I think you gave us the list. I didn't want to call it a laundry list, but
It was kind of a laundry list, yes.
But there's a lot to do, and there are a lot of those policies we anticipate will get quick action. The next question was going to be about Ukraine. If any particular thoughts on changes there, and you did mention Ukraine. So actually, let me go to the question in the chat and then see what other people have, and then because certainly this is a great opportunity for us to ask our two esteemed panelists their thoughts on politics. But the question in the chat, let me start with Mark and then Carrie. With numerous Floridians now holding or being appointed to new positions in the key positions in the new administration, do you anticipate any specific positive or negative impacts on Florida from all the Florida people going to be involved in the new administration? Mark, what do you think, having also worked with many of these people in the past?
Well, I think it's going to be good for Florida. There's no question we're the center of the political universe right now. I live in West Palm Beach. I can see Mar-a-Lago from my roof. Everybody's coming down here for business. They were coming down here prior to Trump because of COVID. We have New Day USA. We've got a lot of national companies moving headquarters within blocks of my location. So not only are we a business capital, so is Miami. There's a number of other locations in Florida that are benefiting. But I think the depth and breadth of our delegation and those that are being picked, other than Mr. Gates, are going to be reflective of the good things we've done in Florida these past several decades. Again, back to Bob Graham and others that we loved working with, I'd love to see more of that coming forward in their attitudes when they step up to the national plate, say, I now represent all Americans, not just Floridians, and I represent all Americans, just not Republicans. So I'm very excited about the opportunity. He's depleting the bench, though, in Florida. We're going to have special elections in at least 2 districts. So that's disruptive, if you will. And Pam Bondi, I think, is going to make a good attorney general. I do believe her work in Florida, especially working with Dave Ehrenberg, the local state attorney, and dealing with drug houses and pill mills and things, have proven her ability to take on the criminal elements inside Florida and hopefully in the nation.
Thank you. Dr. Healy, your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm only a former Floridian, so I may not be exactly the right person to respond to this, but I do think it's an opportunity for certainly Floridians to feel that their issues are front and center in the minds of many of the people who are going to be representing them and on the national level, and so I think that you bring that culture and that context with you, whether you're serving locally or nationally. And I do think it is incumbent on them to try to broaden their perspective once they're in Washington to serve the entire nation. But they're very talented individuals that are being taken from Florida, and so I'm excited for the country that they'll be serving.
Thank you. I saw Steve's hand up, and then I saw our colleague Carol Huberman. So, Steve, do you have a question, or you want to defer to Carol's?
Well, I will ask a question for one of the participants.
Thank you.
First of all, I wanted to welcome Dr. Healy. Luis did the formal introduction. Luis and I are partners. We met a number of years ago, I think when you were in Palm Beach. My question, the question comes from Tony Grogan, who's here. Tony is an executive over at Newsmax. This is a question to Mark. Mark, why was the election not a mandate? You said it was not a mandate. He writes, Trump did 30% better than Harris in the Electoral College and won all 7 battleground states. And Republicans have all 3 branches of government, granted a slim margin in total votes. Why wouldn't that be considered a mandate?
Well, I hear the word mandate. I think it's like this fait accompli that we're in charge now and all other voices need to be silenced. It's just the way I approach things. He has clearly a governing majority in order to start doing what he set out to do when he campaigned for this job and when he held it before. But when you use words like mandate, to me, it's a force majeure. It's telling you this is the way it is, and I don't want to hear any other outside voices. Just the way I approach politics. He is clearly the president. He has won with overwhelming and convincing margins in states that heretofore haven't voted for Republicans in a long while. But let's use that precious mandate carefully, constructively, and with the intent to make every American's life better.
Thank you, Mark. And I was asking that for Tony, and I think he logged off. Oh, well, but thank you.
And then I was wondering if that maybe we are on the record. If you had a
That's all right.
person.
Yeah. Well, Chris Ruddy and I are longtime friends, and anything I say, I would say on the air if we were broadcasting live right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Carol?
Hi, thank you. This is a question to both President Healy and to Congressman Foley. Congressman, you talked about the Year of the Woman, 1992. I was involved in the 2016 presidential campaign, and it broke my heart. I wasn't so involved in the last one, but what do you see? Do you think a woman can become president of the United States? These 2 last elections.
Absolutely.
So what would Nikki Haley have to do to become president?
See, I like Nikki Haley a lot, and I admired her tenacity. I liked what she did as governor of South Carolina. I liked when she debated Trump. I think every good candidate needs somebody who's a strong opposition, not necessarily all their ideology, but force their conversations on tough issues. If you don't have a primary, you never get to view your wide-ranging thoughts. So Hillary Clinton made mistakes. There's no question about it. The deplorable comments affect people. They take it personally. And when you insult people personally, they have a grudge and they show it at the ballot box, in a private ballot box. Kamala, I was surprised, didn't use the 3.5 years under the president to really get out and work and show her capacity, because she's proven it before in California. I just feel like, the president said he's going to be a one-term transitional president. That didn't happen. So she was hamstrung. But I believe in my heart, Nikki Haley, there are other talented women. I always thought somebody like Kay Bailey Hutchinson from Texas. There were women that I felt could lead this country proudly and with great fortitude. And I see it coming. I don't think it's not something we're not going to see in my lifetime, your lifetime. I believe it's going to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I believe it is going to happen, probably sooner than later, definitely within the next 2 cycles, probably. But it will need a robust primary competition in order for that person to prove themselves and truly be the legitimate nominee of the party in the way that Hillary Clinton was. And I think the country just wasn't ready yet at that point. And, I come from Massachusetts now, and for years and years, and I ran for governor back in 2006. And had I won, I would have been the first female governor. And there wasn't a female governor elected until very recently. And so again, it took more than another decade for the electors in Massachusetts to be ready for a woman governor. And when it happens, then it's no problem whatsoever. It really is a glacial transition where people's mindsets begin to see enough examples. And I think seeing Hillary Clinton and seeing Kamala and seeing Nikki Haley is starting to build that understanding in the public mindset that there are women out there who are able to compete at that level and who would be deserving of being president. So I think it's just going to take a little bit longer. And when it happens, it'll be incredibly easy and natural, but it's not going to happen yet.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And see if there's other questions. There is one in the chat, but I'll get to in a second. While we see if there are others, I wanted to follow up. So, Lieutenant Governor, do you think that the way that Kamala Harris was selected for the nomination with no competition, do you think that really hurt her in proving herself amongst voters ultimately?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really hurt Nikki Haley that President Trump wouldn't debate all of the people who were challenging him earlier in the process as well. There has to be a way for voters to see people who are running for president in different environments and pitched against different competitors. And I think it hurt both of those women candidates not to have a normal primary process, and we need to fight to get back to that.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question in the chat about whether you think this will affect or how it will impact relations with Venezuela. So I don't know if either one of you want to comment on the election of Trump and what that will do about getting rid of Maduro. But also Steve has his hand up, so I'm going to pass it back to Steve. And if either of you want to comment on Venezuela when you talk next, feel free to do that.
So I had a question for Mark earlier. So this one is my question to Dr. Healy. We have a number of university professors online, as I am a professor too. And you were president of a college for a number of years. Although we may not have students on now, this will be promulgated widely, and hopefully students will watch this. Can you talk about your experience with engaging students in the political process and what advice you might have for the future?
Yeah. I think one of the most important lessons that's come out of our tumult around higher education in recent months and years is that the university has to be a place where there can be discussion of extreme views, differing views, and with respect and with academic rigor. It can't simply be, I agree, I disagree, we are protesting, this is our view. It is really the responsibility of a university to make sure that those views are informed and that all of the arguments on both sides are heard and understood properly, by the students. And a couple things have to happen in order for that to be the case. One is that universities themselves cannot be taking positions on every issue that occurs in the world at large. They can take positions on things that impact universities, but they should not be looking at the world and taking sides, because what they should be able to do is to be bringing those voices together who can debate those issues and inform their students. So what I would say to students is that it's their responsibility to dig deeper than what they're seeing on social media, than maybe what they've learned in one class at their university or their college. And to really inform themselves and to learn about history, because history so often informs the future, and it is not a topic which is broadly appreciated or taught these days. And so they're going to have to do some work themselves. But the way our internet is structured these days with AI and with all of the resources just at your fingertips, shame on them if they don't do a more deep dive on these big issues that are confronting the world and certainly students today.
Well, thank you very much. You coming a little bit late, you missed my introduction of Sean, who is our moderator, who's a professor at Barry University. And over the years, as I noted earlier, he was the faculty head of the Student Democratic Club and the Student Republican Club. So, you know, he's done his part on our campus where we work at the same campus. So I thank you for your words.
Yeah, and I'd highly recommend the Alexander Hamilton Society. It's an organization that's active on a number of campuses nationwide that that brings speakers of differing views to campus to have civil and informed debates about difficult topics. So if you don't have a chapter of the Alexander Hamilton Society on your campus, that might be one good way to start having those conversations.
Terrific, thank you.
Interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so before we started the program and the recording, we had a little discussion about free speech on campus or lack thereof happening in recent years. So this will continue to be an issue. Steve, another question?
No,
Yeah. Go, Luis, you have a question.
No. I know that Mr. Chavez is waiting for his answer with regard to Latin American policy, and I wonder whether they can respond because I think he's been waiting for a while.
Well, Luis, what I would like to do would be to defer to you because you are the expert in this regard.
Yeah, but I have not talked enough. But I don't know, Mark, you want to relate to that?
Well, listen, there's no question Trump is a reset for global politics. We already see in the case of Ukraine, he probably is not comfortable doing this, but he's already negotiating some land settlement with the Russians. Thousands and thousands of people have been killed on both sides. It definitely proves Russia doesn't have the capabilities that we've long held that they do, as this should have been over in a month if Russia was intent on taking all of the territory of Ukraine. I don't like the bloodshed, but I can see some people starting to settle debates. Syria right now, what's happening in Aleppo and other areas, Iran and Russia back its current leader, and I can see that changing. I think Saudi Arabia was kicking people out that were related to Hamas or Hezbollah. So you already start seeing some international players playing defense against Trump's unpredictability. And, you know, he does claim, and rightfully so, we weren't in any wars during the time of his presidency. That would be a noble objective for the next 4 years, if that's possible. China's always threatening Taiwan. Is there a chance we can resolve those issues? Because all of the conflicts, whether it's Venezuela and the Trinidad de Aragua group that's now forming in the United States, we need to have dialogue with the leaders. Maduro, we hope, will be gone. We'd love free and fair elections. When I was in Congress, we fought the drug trade in Colombia and tried to get the narco terrorists out of there. Unfortunately, they moved to Venezuela and then started transshipping through Haiti and Jamaica and Bahama chain. But I think that we all have to have a conversation on what we'd like the world to look like, and getting rid of some of the bad actors would be a good start.
Mark, interesting, because I want to just to say a couple of things. First of all, just two reactions to Mark and to Kerry. First of all, with regard to Venezuela, Marco Rubio is going to be the next Secretary of State. It seems to me that that is almost a fait accompli. And Marco Rubio is very knowledgeable about Venezuela. Okay. And I remember meeting with him about Venezuela when he wasn't then still, I mean, you know, Venezuela was relatively a new topic, and I think he understands it extremely well. It's not clear to me, and maybe it is clear to both of you, whether there is a plan that, what is he thinking? It's going to be the policy of maximum pressure, or is it going to be some sort of a compromise with Maduro? I don't know. Sounds like, you know, Marco Rubio will go tough on Venezuela, but it's not clear to me exactly how. The other thing that I wanted to say is just in response to what Kerry said. Kerry, you are right that university presidents have a responsibility to create a good environment to debate any issue. But on the other hand, I think we have seen a deterioration, and I believe I had a conversation with you a few years ago where you basically complained about professors in the liberal arts that were biased. I am a professor of sociology, and right now there was a decision at the level of the the state of Florida, not to make introduction to sociology a core course. On the one hand, it angered a lot of people, including me a little bit, but on the other hand, I blame it on the professors of sociology, because instead of providing, I would say, an objective point of view in class, they basically pushed all kinds of agendas, whether it is critical theory, race theory, or whether it is social justice, an extreme form of social justice. So the question is, what do we do with the professors? And the question is whether, it will be, and I don't know whether it's in the hands of Donald Trump, but it could well be in the hands of university presidents to create new criteria or new standards for professors, particularly in the social sciences. So I'm sorry.
No, this is a very important issue, and I have to say it's one that's not going to be easily remediated. It is a well-known and established fact. It is not an opinion that that the vast majority of professors in liberal arts institutions are on the Democratic side, and that increasingly conservative professors are either marginalized or simply not given tenure or not hired in the first place. And so even those professors who have conservative views are often silenced or self edit so that they don't attract the displeasure of their colleagues. And if you think about how professors are chosen, they're chosen by their colleagues and by panels of their colleagues. So it's a natural situation that unless they have in their mind as one of the criteria for selecting new colleagues, a diversity of opinion, they're going to end up with people who think very much like themselves. And so over time, this has occurred again and again in colleges across the country. And so one of the reasons I brought up the Alexander Hamilton Society is what they do is they actually bring people with conservative viewpoints on foreign policy to speak at colleges around the country simply because there aren't professors there who can present that point of view. And so there's the assumption in many cases that the more liberal point of view will be provided by academics within the institution, and that you literally have to import these other points of view in order to have a balanced discussion. And obviously change in this regard is very hard because hiring at universities is slow. A university might be able to hire 1 or 2 or maybe 3, new professors a year. Most smaller colleges don't have that capacity to expand rapidly. And so whatever you do, it's going to be a gradual unwinding of this particular bias that occurs. And that's also why I said that even if a student has taken a class at a university and believes that they understand a political situation or a political history, that they need to do their own research and that they need to read and seek out other points of view to make sure that they are truly educated on all these topics and that they have a balanced point of view.
Well, the one other thing I think is coming to play here, Lieutenant Governor, is the fact that money is a great equalizer. And after what's happened on the campuses of Harvard and NYU and other places, Columbia, people like Bill Ackman are speaking with their wallets, and they are going to see some kind of recalibration of the institutes they've long supported. Because I think they were startled, as most of us were, of the groups of demonstrators that weren't just speaking about peace and trying to solve problems, but were absolutely advocating for Hamas and some of the most sad chapters of university life I've ever seen. Jewish students being spat upon, afraid to walk to campus or on campus. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, where most of America sat back and go, oh, that's how colleges are today. And I think there's been a rude awakening, to your point about the Alexander Hamilton Society and things of that nature. I think those are slow builds, but we need to insist upon it, just to bring equilibrium, not to counterbalance by overdoing it, but bringing viewpoints to have debate. I just never thought in my lifetime I'd see people in a city like Manhattan supporting people who had just killed 1,700 Jews on October 7th and sit there and have the Hamas flag and burning American flags. You know, it's not the days of Vietnam and Kent State University. This is past that, and it's very sad. It was sad for me to watch.
No, it's been a rude awakening. And it was important that the readjustment that occurred at many Ivy League schools happened, this year. And the one place where people who do have money and want to invest in higher education to try to balance out the discussion where they can have an impact is in centers and institutes, because those can have an immediate reaction. They can have an immediate response. They can have speakers like we're speaking here today, and they can bring in those balanced viewpoints. The faculty itself, this will be glacial change. You can object to it all day long and object to their bias, but you're not going to get rid of it anytime soon. And you can't mandate, because of tenure, what someone believes. And so you can certainly have, moving forward, a desire to have a diversity of viewpoints represented on your faculty. But the fastest way to adjust the imbalance that exists today on many college campuses is to invest in institutes and centers that can provide that kind of information and those kinds of speakers and points of view that are simply absent in many places.
Thank you, Dr. Healy. Sean, we have one more question and then I'll wrap it up. Because
okay, the one in the chat?
Yes.
It's a really good question. Thank you. Yes, this has been an excellent conversation. Like most of these, we could continue on all day long. And so thank you to the Center for hosting this. I was just going to mention that the former president of FIU, Mark Rosenberg, always says it's easier to change history than to change a history department, to the points that were just being made there. So I'm going to read the last question and then get ready to sign off and go teach a U.S. history class. Thank you to Steve and to Lewis. Thank you to Mark and to Carrie and to everyone for this. Let's continue the conversation into the future. But the question's a super good one in the chat. We're talking about bipartisanship as if it's a good thing. But many of the most recent big federal policy choices have been bipartisan, like the Iraq War, the financial sector bailout, the COVID response. These might be seen as negatively now. Why is bipartisanship a virtue in and of itself? Shouldn't people be looking to get the policies right on their side? So I will listen to your answers. And again, thank you very much. I believe in bipartisanship, but let's help Mr. Navarro have hope in bipartisanship rather than these negative ideas.
Well, I'd like to provide him with an alternative to bipartisanship. I'd like to say that there should be more political parties in the United States today. And that's why I've been part of the founding of the Forward Party. In 80% of the states around the country today, there's really only one party in that state, whether it's Massachusetts, where it's all Democrats, or whether it's Nebraska, where it's all Republicans. Voters in those states don't actually experience democracy. And in most cases, in 70% of all the elections, all the way from city council up to president, or just short of president, in most states, 70% of those elections people are running unopposed. And that's not democracy. And the reason why they're running unopposed is because the other party in that case has dwindled to insignificance, or they know they're going to lose, and so people just don't even come forward. So we need to have enough choice for people on the ballot so that they feel that someone there is actually going to represent their interests. And so I urge people to look into the Forward Party to see what it represents. Right now, we have a set of principles that we support, and those principles include supporting the Constitution and rule of law and collaboration across the aisle in the best interest of the people of America. So I think that what's wrong here is not something being wrong with collaboration or bipartisanship, but certainly the fact that there aren't enough choices for voters in America today.
Thank you, Dr. Healy. Mark, did you have some closing comments? And then I need to close this out.
Well, on the bipartisan level, it shouldn't be a bad word. It's not
Mhm.
about giving up your principles in order to solve a problem. They use the example of the 2008 bailout. Yes, that was bipartisan. The options were everyone in America's pension fund going bankrupt, everyone's 401k going bankrupt. That was a tough vote for members, but we saw the writing on the wall. It was hold hands together and jump, or let the entire economy collapse. Once in a while, bipartisanship produces real results, oftentimes on the right side of the aisle, if you will. But you can't sit there and fight in Washington by simply saying, this is partisan warfare. We're going to make you do what we want. It's just not the way I've ever believed in our country's principles.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Carrie. One thing I want to say about Dr. Healy is that she has such a large background. We're calling her Dr. Healy, President Healy, almost Governor Healy. So thank you very much, Dr. Healy, for coming. Mark Foley, Mark, thank you for coming. It's good to see you. I do want to say that this would not happen without the people who support us, who come to these events. We are a 501c3. Please visit our website at palmbeachdemocracy.org. Some of you came late, didn't hear my spiel at the beginning. And we do have a donation button, and we would love for you to, for those who do support us and continue to support us, so we can bring you these incredible programs. I want to thank Sean Foreman for being the moderator. I want to just mention a couple names. Dr. Leah Blumenfeld, a colleague who is now chair of the Political Science and History Department at Barry. She's here. And Carol Huberman is my colleague. And I just want to thank everyone for coming, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Luis, I have to thank Luis, of course.
No, don't worry. No need.
Thank you.
This program was
Bye-bye.
terrific.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.